You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Hertz here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. And we are back with our last week discussing RV Raman's A Dire Isle, the second novel in the Harith Athreya series, exploring an archaeological dig in Bundelkhand in northern India. Hertz challenged me to solve this novel, and I had a great time doing it.
You had a pretty good go of it. You pretty much smashed this one out of the park, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but we'll gain your points a bit later on.
Yeah, we will. I have many feelings.
I know you do. I know many large canine feelings. But yeah, no, this was a great novel to read. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it on my end and obviously challenge you to the mystery, where the real fun is how many different mysteries can we cram into one novel? How many culprits can we have? It's many. Well, it's like 6.
Also,
it's great.
Weirdly, there's like, how do I put this? There's so many things that just go untouched that really surprised me.
Sure.
This novel, to me, was very much murder mystery comfort food. There wasn't anything that, like, pushed me beyond the bounds, challenged my ideas.
No.
It was all familiar, all really nicely dressed up, a little bit clunky in a very charming way.
I think the weirdest thing to me is how we get given the map of the compound and we hear...
never use it.
Well, this is the thing. We hear all these discussions of like, I heard this sound, and at this time I heard this, and at this time I went to steal these jewels, which we haven't even talked about because it really isn't that relevant.
Nope.
Like, most of the information we learn is about Pratap and his stealing of the necklace, which he then gets killed over trying to sell, which is...
Yeah, I was pretty confident that he was going to be killed.
It was just an idiot. That's why he only gets like one actual scene.
Leeching off of other people really just seems to run in the family.
It does, and thus they deserve death. That's how it works, apparently, especially in the world of finance.
Let's just get back to a quick summary before we get too lost on this particular train of thought. Following on from where we left off with a large paw print on Naaz Tapu at the end of last stretch, we return, discover Pratap's body, and then go on a sightseeing tour for most of the rest of the book. We go sightseeing on Naaz Tapu to an ancient temple where there is a giant Great Dane descended from the original canine from mythology.
As well as a mastiff, which was foreshadowed because, and I'm disappointed you didn't pick up on this one, Flex, Athreya says, I wonder what kind of dog Bola was, a hound or a mastiff. And it's obviously both. Come on. And that's it. That's the greatest mystery in the whole novel.
It's so good. It's so good. We continue our sightseeing tour. We go and meet Colonel Kanai, who was first named at the end of last chapter.
What a weird character.
There was this amazing moment where they're sitting down in a museum and Colonel Kanai goes like, oh yes, I had an agent on the inside. And Athreya and Bhupinder go like, what? Really? Who is it? And there's a knock on the door and Madhav walks in.
He walks in.
It read to me like the here's one I prepared earlier moment in a cooking show. And it was fantastic.
It's such a ridiculous scene. And then they have this whole like routine where they're just asking Madhav all these questions and he keeps looking at, can I answer that? I don't even know. Why am I even here? Who even knows? I'm here to sit in a chair and say nothing most of the time. It's ridiculous.
It's so good. And then we end in the breakdown scene, which runs fairly standard. There were a couple of moments in it that I just absolutely ate up, though. We go through Jagan, the fence's involvement. We go through Mitali and Ulhas, and there's this hilarious bit. I kind of caught onto this into the first week, but I didn't really take it too seriously.
What is this?
Where
how pale she is, that one?
Where he talks to Priya, and he's like, now Priya, if you were to take a chubby, black, long-haired, straight-haired lady and try and disguise yourself,
make her
what
the exact
would you end
opposite.
up with?
You'd end up with Mitali. How weird. It's such a weird reveal. Like, it's entertaining in that, like, of course, it was the opposite of what the criminal was saying the entire time. But it's also like, because she like used to be fat, she must be the killer. Like, okay.
It's ridiculous. It's kind of incredibly contrived, but in a bit of a charming way. And then straight after that, Oldhouse is like, I'll admit I'm a bronze runner, but we didn't kill MM. And Athreya goes, of course, because the bronze runners were so partitioned that you didn't know there was more of you. And everyone goes, a fourth bronze runner.
It's so good. It's so ridiculously over the top, that entire scene. And then we got to get to the best part. The best part is when they trot out the murder weapons.
They have a cricket bag full of custom welded murder weapons.
It's ridiculous.
It's so over the top.
Like, of course they're well funded. We know this from all the museum artifacts they've been stealing. But like, it's approaching the level of like a Bond film.
Yes.
With all these bizarre murder weapons and devices for leaving wounds.
Oh, man. And the other one, this is one I did take issue with that I wanted to raise. During the breakdown scene, we trap Madav by saying like, we told you to go organize a raid on Naaz Tapu because we suspected the bronze runners were there, but we set up cameras so we could capture footage of you getting your stuff out. Why wasn't that a scene?
I don't know.
It would have been so much fun, a like late night stakeout.
Well, that's the thing. They could have revealed him in the act, caught red-handed, as it were. But I don't know. I guess that RV Raman really wanted to have the like sit down with all the suspects and to reveal everybody at once, which has its own charm.
The other thing that was weird, but I didn't have as much of an issue with, was when we meet the two dogs and Nazarine's brothers.
Yep.
They're like, they're set up on the island, living their lives.
Well, but then they're maybe not. Maybe I think it's that they actually move around. They like live sometimes on the island,
they live
sometimes
in the
off.
area, and they come to the island X number of times a year to check in on like the tomb of their ancestors there.
Yeah, totally.
And that's where the bronze runners have set up their stash. And there's a fantastic scene where they walk in and there's like a fiberglass wall at the back of the tomb, and they're like, what the hell is this doing here? And they push it over and there's all of the loot.
It's ridiculous.
It's like breaking into the pharaoh's tomb. It's phenomenal. It was just kind of so bizarre having these like two brother characters
that we've never heard of before.
Again, I want to come back to a point I made last week. Bhupinder is a secondary character, and they really could have given his role in the story to anyone else. He could have been the guy in Delhi. He could have been one of Nazarine's brothers.
He could have.
The twist could have been that the detective was one of Nazarine's brothers, and they were working to like tie their secret back together.
You know what? That would have been perfect.
And I mean, this is the same point with Bhupinder, right? Like, tying Bhupinder in to be one of the other characters in the story would have been contrived and ridiculous, but we've already crossed the contrived and ridiculous line in an enjoyable way,
Look,
so why not celebrate that more?
I'm just saying, I feel bad for whichever of the two brothers, they sit down at the family dinner, and they have the two seats, one which is for the reincarnated prince, one is for the reincarnated bodyguard, and they have to choose which son goes where.
Listen, they said that Nazneen is only reincarnated in alternate generations, so presumably they take turns. It's like the prince one generation, the princess the other generation, because that way you don't get into the like weird incest mythology.
It's true. We don't want to get. You
don't want to touch that.
We don't want to get there. We don't want to think about that part of the mythos.
And yet here we are.
It definitely exists. Here we are. I blame Flex for this one. No. I thoroughly enjoy that whole when we go into the temple, and the big reveal is, of course, that not only is there the bronze runner stash, but like the family stash of Nazreen and her like her ancestors. And if the bronze runners had just cared about the archaeology all along, they could have found this additional stash, gotten away with it, because nobody knows about this, because that's the defining feature, is that like all the stuff they've stolen from the museums, everybody knows about. But if they just cared about the archaeology, if Miss Khan had actually looked hard enough and found the secret mythological stash or whatever, they could have run away into the sunset with that stuff.
I mean, and that's like the closing line of the book too, is that's the secret that Athreya gets let in on for having earned Nazarine's trust, which is
it's great.
Kind of a cool bit.
It's the real treasure all along.
Gosh, it's
fun.
I just had a great time, and I hope that our celebration of all of the silly and ridiculous things in this book shines through, because I cannot recommend this novel in the same way that I would recommend And Then There Were None, or The Decagon House Murders, or The Devotion of Suspect X. Then this novel didn't blow my mind.
No, it was fun.
But it cradled my mind in a soft, silky embrace. I could let myself go and just be free on the winds of mystery.
Yeah.
And not have to worry too much about
the complicated
the innumerable bizarre things that happen. What a great time. All right, we are going to wrap this bit of the discussion here. We will be back to talk a bit more about the mystery, the puzzles, the intrigue, and such towards the end of the show. Stick around.
It's going to be great.
We've got RV Raman up next. You're listening to Death of the Reader, your murder mystery world tour. You're on 2SER 107.3. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. We are discussing RV Raman's A Dire Isle all the way to the end. Full spoilers are engaged. And we are once again joined by RV Raman himself. Last week we spoke about his debut novel, Fraudster. And this week, let's get a little bit further into Harith Athreya. Over here in Australia, one of our big trends at the moment, and it has been for a little while, is regional crime, diving into small towns, stories off the beaten path. When there are so many picturesque places in India, like Bundelkhand in A Dire Isle, for writers to explore, why do you think we still see so much of the cities in crime fiction that makes it to the West?
I would probably look at two reasons. One is I think most writers are more familiar with it. And most writers, at least in the Indian context, I would say about 90% plus live in big cities, and especially English fiction. The people who live in smaller places are either not sufficiently conversant with the language, or they are not into writing or reading very much. So one is that, the writer himself or herself. The second one is the audience. The audience seem to be able to relate to a city-based fiction more easily than something else. When you're writing off-grid kind of a location, which I'm trying to do, there is a risk that some readers don't like it. It doesn't resonate with somebody else. So I find that some of my readers come back and tell me that I didn't like this location, or I didn't like something in that particular setting. But I would say about 80-90% are in favor of it. I think these are the two reasons: the audience expectation and the familiarity of the writers.
Yeah. Now we're chatting about, elements of crime fiction that can be relatable, to your audience. And one unavoidable presence in Harith Athreya's stories is modern technology. And you've commented before on the She Done It podcast about authors like Sue Grafton, who set their stories in the past to avoid that sort of thing. But I thought it was a challenge that you took in stride. Do you feel like there's untapped potential in bringing technology into mystery?
I think so. If you get a little deeper into technology, you can have so much more variety in evidence, clues, all of that. And for example, if I were to take a simple device that we wear on our hands for fitness, the fitness bands. Mm-hmm. Now, the evidence stored in the fitness band can be very, very useful for an investigator if the person who's died wears a fitness band. It gives you a whole range of evidence which traditionally we didn't have. But the issue there is, how do I take it out? How do I show it to the user? Now, to the reader? Will the reader be happy reading this? Or they'll say, watch it as again, why do I need so much of technology? So I have been experimenting with this. There have been versions in which I have used some of this evidence. Then I also find that sometimes my publisher says, let's not have too much of technology. Is going to turn some people off. So it's a challenge that way.
Yeah. Well, I thought one thing that was interesting about A Dire Isle is that there's a back and forth play almost between the obfuscating nature of modern technology and the complexities therein and the indiscernible nature of the Naaz Tapu myth. What do you think made them such natural companions?
I'm not sure I have a reasoning for that. It just came instinctively. I think that the dark unknown of the isle felt very, how do I put this? It felt a good companion for technology. For example, if one of the places they use those the radio waves to locate the ruins. So some of that. So I thought the natural mystery of the darkness of the isle can be penetrated using technology. Right. So that's why it felt instinctively that they go together. It was not any conscious thought.
Yeah, there's almost like the classic idea there that, technology without explanation is indistinguishable from magic, right?
I kind of love and hate that quote. It's a good quote, but it's so prevalently used.
It really is.
Now, speaking of the unknown, the supernatural, we see a lot of, plenty of European mythology in writing, in murder mystery, and in general. Do you think, Raman, that the world is ready for India's mythological archetypes in its fiction, its popular fiction?
I think so. I would not. I don't know how large the market is or how many people will want to read it, but there are certainly large, substantial chunks of readers who are looking for that. See, India, in many ways, it's an extremely old civilization, thousands of years old, and we have myths and stories which go back donkey's years. There's a huge variety which is different from Europe, and it can be taken to the world. We just don't have enough vehicles to take it to the world. But I think there will be a section of the readers who would be very, very interested. One of the things that's been happening in the Indian fiction market over the last 10 years is a lot of these old epics and classics are being reinterpreted. Even the old ones like Mahabharata, Ramayana, which are thousands of years old, they are being reinterpreted for the young audience. They are being rewritten for the young audience. For example, it is written many of these epics are written from a male's viewpoint. So you have writers now who are writing it from a female character's viewpoint. And targeting the young ladies in India. So extending that, I think the world would like to look at the myths from India.
Now, you're talking about the prevalency of kind of spotlighting the female viewpoint to kind of reframe these historical stories, these epic tales. You've been spotlighting young lady detectives ever since you came out with Fraudster in 2014. And in A Dire Isle, you actually saw a girl named Mopriya as one of Athreya's sidekicks. She proves key to gaining unexpected and sometimes covert insight into the Diggs characters. Do you think that Mopriya will grow up to be an expert detective just like the story's protagonist?
Well, that's looking way into the future, but she has the ingredients to become one. A lot of the fiction that I have read do not showcase the female aspect enough. And for me, if I go back, the biggest influences on me in my life have probably been three different ladies. And I've very consciously wanted to bring out the female point of view. In all my novels, excepting A Will to Kill, I think I have fairly strong female characters. Even in The Dire Isle, I think Nazreen is, I really like the character.
It's fantastic.
So, and you will find that in my thrillers, books 3 and 4 has a young lady who's a detective, police inspector. It is a conscious attempt.
One of the other things I wanted to get into is there are some things in A Dire Isle that in a book any less sincere would feel like satire. Like Nazreen's giant dogs, the like custom-made weapons that the criminals have, the pre-unveiling of the locked room before the murder actually happens. Is there a trick to you infusing the mystery with the same joy that I think you had writing it, or does it just come out naturally for you from the process?
I think it's largely a natural outcome of how you write, but parts of what you're saying is true because it may not be a conscious thought, but at the back of your mind, it's running, and that's what makes these things. So for me, the act of writing has to be enjoyable. The thing is, I don't view writing as a career. I'm done with my career. I've made my money. I'm settled. I'm just writing. I'm just doing something to enjoy myself, right? So I want it to flow. I don't want to plan too much, any of that. So a lot of the things go in the back of my mind, and then they just come through when I write.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you say, you started writing as a project after retiring from finance. Do you think in another life you would have wished to start sooner, or was the minimal pressure retirement environment perfect for why you love writing?
Oh, I would have liked to have started earlier. A couple of things made it difficult. One is that one had to work and build the financial net for the family, so didn't have the time. The writing takes a lot of time. The second thing is technology. And funnily enough, I am dyslexic and I have trouble with spellings, huge trouble with spellings. I couldn't have written anything substantial before the word processor came. So I couldn't have done it, for example, during my childhood or my teenager days.
So interesting.
So that's how I would have liked to have done it earlier. But
that is an absolutely fascinating note to end on, the idea that your modern version of the crime novel is infused with the same idea that it couldn't have been born without technology. And I absolutely love that. So RV Raman, thank you so much for joining us here on Death of the Reader. It has been a pleasure having you on the show and featuring your work, and we can't wait to get more from you.
Thank you. Entirely my pleasure. Nice meeting you guys.
RV Raman right there. We are discussing his novel A Dire Isle, the second in the Harith Athreya series, and we'll be back with more of that in just a second. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Hertz here for your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we are here. This is it, Hertz, for our last portion of discussion on RV Raman's
Portion?
A Dire Isle.
That's almost like points.
Yeah, that was exactly why I chose that word. I wasn't just trying to switch the intro up for the hell of it.
That's dumb. That's it. Well, you know me, any change scares me, and thus I had to tie it into something that I am very well familiar with, that being the point system, which we know and love.
While you make your final calculations on my points, I'm sure they're very complicated. We are discussing all the way to the end of this book.
Several monkeys working on it right now.
So full spoiler warning. Herds, tell me, do I get them?
Yeah, so there were three aspects. Obviously, you posed two different theories, so you get a point for that.
1 point
and there were three aspects of the story, some of which I tried to bamboozle you on a little bit. I asked you about the financial crime, and you said Dr. Corder.
Yeah, that basically doesn't get an answer, does it? That was kind of weird.
Yeah, nah. I mean, Dr. Corder is the person doing the crime because he has a third account that he's funneling funds into. You got that. You picked Madav as the killer, so you get a point for that. Unfortunately, you did have the Bronze Runners +1. I was very impressed with you for spotting Yagan and throwing him in there because I had forgotten about that character completely. But you did add Pratap. So
in my defense, listen, I'm not bargaining for points here, but Pratap was running goods.
He was very sus.
He was running bronze. Even if he wasn't a bronze runner by rank and file.
You know what? I refuse to give it a point based on this technicality. It has to be a capital B, and I don't see no capital B on the word bronze in
I'm not
set.
canvassing for points here. I've got no problem. I just want to make sure the audience understands that I beat you.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you won't award me the points to prove it.
It's not like I've been working for like 2 whole episodes trying to move you towards Pratap to think he's suspicious, to try and catch you. It's not like I've been trying to do that. My point is, he's not a capital B, capital R bronze runner.
No,
so you will receive 3 points for this book. But I was very impressed. You did manage to pretty much figure everything out. So on a less important and unprofessional level, it was very good. It was very good seeing you work.
I was proud of myself with Madav. I thought Liam Dunn had sent him there. That didn't end up being the case.
No, it was Kanai, who is a great character.
I think by the time we had Kanai's name announced, I was convinced that he was working for that guy. But I thought that like Kanai maybe had been employed by Dunn, and there was a chain of command.
By Dunn, yeah. It was going to be a big twist at the end where it's like, you sent 2 of us, and we were working together the whole time.
Yeah, that was pretty much my expectation, and it was good fun. Like, as I was saying at the end of last week, this novel, it's very easy to see what's going on, but you spend the entire time like tipping just absolute featherweight scales between which way one character's leaning, and that was really engaging.
I thought you were going to say tipping cows, but I like the featherweight scales metaphor. It's much classier.
And when you die, the god Horus will weigh your heart against cows.
Against that tipped, how many cows you've tipped during your lifetime. That's a much more exciting Egyptian myth. Speaking of myth, Nazreen was pretty cool. She didn't end up sort of figuring into the evil side of the mystery, the crime side. But she was very helpful to the detective.
I did like at the end of the book in the breakdown scene when Madav goes to leave and she's like, I got a big dog out there and he won't be pleased to see you.
That's what I was going to mention. Yeah. It's great. 2 big dogs. Yeah, no, I love that in the end, even though they could have just arrested everybody with the police, they were like, we also have 2 large dogs.
But there's a bunch of other stuff that I found kind of bizarre about like the explanation and how things happen. For example, we're talking about how the footsteps that went over to MM's body were like the same depth as the ones that Priya's had made because they'd like filled in, so they must have been deeper before. And someone says something to the effect of like, yeah, this person must have been a lot heavier than MM because the footprints were so deep. And it's like, Well, of course they were much heavier than her. They were carrying her.
It was, I will say, it was fun to see Mopriya do her work. She is the real Watson of the story.
Yeah. I mean, that was the good thing, right? Is that Mopriya as a character in this story,
She's great.
she was almost like an audience insert in a way where the detective was turning and going like, hey, why didn't you try to figure this stuff out? Why didn't you come along on the investigation with me? And I liked her in that sense, but it also felt like there were just like a few weird distractions. Like as you were mentioning before, the entire thing with like the setup of the locked room, it's like, here's all of the times that everyone left and here's a diagram of the compound and how people could have gotten out, but it just doesn't end up factoring in at all.
It doesn't end up being relevant.
Like they just went over the balcony and got killed elsewhere.
Yeah, like in a way, it is kind of Golden Age detective fiction-y to be like, well, actually, there was a loophole because, as we all know, a locked room is never really locked.
Yes.
But at the same time, it definitely does feel like we're kind of pushing that to the side. Like
it would be, for example, just to pick one out of thin air, out of the magical rain, it'd be like having a locked room where you spend the entire novel describing the four walls and how they're all detailed and just never mention that there is no roof.
Yeah, sure. That would be ridiculous. I'm sure we won't ever find a murder mystery that relies on that particular trope.
Are we playing this bit up a bit too much?
No, please don't. I was going to say, just to like jump back on what you said earlier, like Mopriya, I actually really like as a character because she is the Watson, but so is Nazreen. Like they balance each other. We have a Watson that is a small child, so that then in the other half, in the first half of the novel, so that in the second half we can rely more on. Obviously, this like goes back and forth, but we can rely more on Nazreen, who is the like person who knows everything. Rather than hiding her away in a box somewhere to be revealed at the end of the story, like so many of her characters are. Yeah, like that's such a frustrating trope.
They like promote what's going on in the story, you know, the joyous childlike wonder of going through a mystery and having fun with it is personified in Priya.
In Nazreen, obviously.
And the flip side, the dark, gritty, gruesome side of the mystery is personified through Nazreen. And it's almost like you have these two specters of reading mystery fiction pitted against each other in a like weird collaborative way.
I don't know if I'd say pitted against each other, but I like where you're going with that. No.
But it's like, it's a balance, right? You know, you only ever really get one of their sides of the story at a time in this novel. We're either getting the childlike wonderment or we're getting the spooky stuff. And they're like trading screen time.
It's true. There is exactly one moment, I think, where Mopriya and Nazreen really engage, and that's the first time we see Nazreen, and she's like Mopriya's just terrified. She's like, I don't want to engage with that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of moments when they go over to the shore. There's one really great moment where they're discussing the wounds on MM's neck, and he's like, oh yeah, there's no saliva, and Mopriya and Nazreen are there and goes, well, I suppose a phantom dog wouldn't leave any saliva.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I like that. It's consistent with the myth.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any more things I can say about this novel because, like, as I will describe this book, I'm sure to many people, it's murder mystery comfort food.
Sure.
I don't feel like I've had an incredible 5-course luxurious meal, but goddamn if this wasn't the tastiest grilled cheese I ever had.
I'm gonna go make a grilled cheese now. You got me hungry. My goodness. Oh dear. Anyway, what shall we wrap up things
Absolutely.
here? What are we doing next week, Flex? You have to challenge me to a book now, or
it is
some other nonsense. Yeah, what do you mean it's time?
Conclude our Indian leg of Death of the Reader for 2022.
Leg. Delicious.
Yeah, that's right. We're eating one whole leg.
With grilled cheese on it.
We are going to be covering The Bombay Prince by Sujata Massey.
That sounds fun.
This is the 3rd book in the Praveen Mystery series.
I just can't wait to get back to Bombay again. It seems like this is
we
just had a novel where we didn't go to Bombay and we're already back. We had one novel off and now we're back in Bombay. Do we get to go to Malabar Hill?
Right.
Oh
Listen,
my goodness.
I'm sure having done the legwork, having done the groundwork, all of our kind friends out in the world, including you listening, will send us suggestions for novels not set in Bombay that still follow the Murder Mystery World Tour. And then when we return next to India, we can ignore Bombay altogether. I'm sure it will never come up.
There's a really great novel. I think it's called Murders on Malabar Hill. I feel like that's the one we should do.
Funny you should mention that. That's from the same series.
Oh, is it really? Shock!
Yeah, it's
horror.
crazy.
Who knew? That's insane.
You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here. Thank you for joining us for RV Raman's Adaya Isle. We will be back with The Bombay Prince by Sajada Massi next week on the show. You're listening to 2SER 107.3, and this is your Murder Mystery World Tour.
See you next time.